want students to engage with Bitcoin in a lot of different ways. The first step is just to learn about Bitcoin. What is it? How do you use it? The next step is to actually start using it for themselves, either paying their peers or making purchases. Finally, we want to move on to creation. This is MIT. We've got some of the brightest young technical minds of a generation, and we want them to start building on top of the Bitcoin protocol. Finally, we want to see this expand beyond MIT. Our goal is not just to get MIT using Bitcoin and building on it and contributing to it, but really to change the world. And I think you're going to hear a lot of ideas today that do that.
We'd like to take Bitcoin from these kind of geeky 26 to 34 character length addresses into something that is pleasant, and to make monetization of information beautiful.
So what is Fireflies? Fireflies is an app that lets you get anything you want delivered from wherever you want. It removes the barriers of centralized delivery and puts the entire delivery transaction back into the hands of the user. So what this essentially means is that it allows you to both order and deliver through your extended social network, all using Bitcoin.
Transactions are going to be there forever. But why is it so? Why are transactions forever for everyone to see? It's because we want to enforce honesty, that nobody is overspending, that if somebody tries to do that, you look on the ledger and reject his transaction. Can we do better? Yes. At Zero Cash, we developed first fully anonymous decentralized currency. The Zero Cash approach is to take a ledger, not of transactions, but a ledger of proofs. Proofs of the statement that I'm using unspent coins of my own and my transaction is valid. It preserves a balance. However, I'm not telling you whom I'm sending the money or what's the amount. All of that remains hidden.
But what about privacy? So we don't really control our data. We have no control over it. It's like a one-way mirror where companies can see our every move, but we can't see what's behind the curtain. Now, this is the situation today. We're not exposed to it. There's some kind of elaborate mechanism that exploits our online identities to fuel some kind of archaic, decades-old business model. So can we do better? How can we give people control over the data? We'd have to design some kind of decentralized system because we don't want any third party to have full control over our data. It also needs to be scalable and robust because we can't simply ask users to store their own information locally. It wouldn't work. It's not an option. And that's where Ethos comes in. We're building a decentralized network that gives you full control over your data. We're doing this by storing all data in a decentralized network, and we're using blockchain technology to ensure that your data is safe.
If we think about the history of financial services and the history of technological innovation, which banks have, for the most part, been incredibly conservative and relatively slow to adopt, which has pushed them down the value chain over time. The question then is, within the mind of a large institution, what are the parameters? What are the milestones? What are the conditions that you want to see that would get you and your institution to get into what's happening here? What would it take for you to feel comfortable to go to your boss and say, look, I think Bitcoin as a currency, it's problematic, it's got some questions, there are lots of things we don't know, but it's a fundamental technology that some of the most important institutions, and by the way, some of the most powerful investors in the world, are betting on big time. What is it that they see and that they understand that we don't get? How do we get over it? How do we make a decision to dive into the Bitcoin world, the alternative currency world, and the blockchain 2.0 world to begin to understand how it can impact banks?
Theoretically, we could have used the exact same technology. We could use a blockchain to maintain a database where the rule for updating the database could be pretty much anything. So then, once again, you have a database, but this time the database isn't there to store currency. It's there to keep track of which websites are registered and who they're registered to. And the rule for updating the database is that if you own, first of all, if you already own a domain, you can transfer it to someone else. And second, if there's a domain that hasn't been claimed yet, then you can claim it. So that's just currency's one application, domain names are another, and as it turns out, there are actually many more. And the point of Ethereum is essentially to be the Android, not the iPhone, the Android. We're an open platform. the Android of cryptocurrency, where you could build a currency on Ethereum, and you can think of that as being an app, or as we're calling it, a decentralized application, a DApp. You can put a name registry on Ethereum. You can put a contract system. It's also an interesting platform for experimenting with sort of different, more innovative models of corporate decision making. So there are some economists that are interested in this idea of using prediction markets essentially as a way of helping companies make decisions. So would use a market to figure out, would the share price be higher if we do this, or would the share price be higher if we do that? And then potentially you could even have, the market decide automatically. So that's something that there's been a lot of research in. It might work, it might not, but makes it easier to try.
But there are a lot of Vitalics running around the world right now, trying to think of ways to put a lot of people in this room out of a job. And I mention that because it either could be viewed as a fantastic opportunity or a big risk, and everybody looks at the newspaper industry and companies like Kodak and how they reacted or did not react to when the writing was on the wall. And I think we would all agree that the existing system as it exists, it's way too complex, there's too many friction points, it's way too expensive. And what this technology does is it decentralizes trust and enables basically the kind of recreation of a financial system that doesn't rely upon big vaults and big buildings, and puts it all in the cloud, which is going to have some pretty amazing and exciting and some scary implications for all of us.
As the infrastructure and the machinery in the back potentially changes to a blockchain-driven world, that infrastructure change is going to be largely invisible to consumers and to corporate customers if banks do the right job of wrapping it the way they always have.
I think that everything that we've seen for the past hour is more than smart, yeah? Everybody, yeah? Wow. So, okay, box ticked.
If so many incredibly smart people are working on this and investing their time and energy, let alone the money flowing into it, it's nothing that we can all ignore, right? So if there's anybody out there who's ignoring or thinking that nothing is going to come out of this, I think they are just absolutely wrong. When someone doesn't necessarily know the complexity that is involved with some of that, it's very easy to think that the solution is in a new piece of technology. And I'm not saying that's incredibly unimportant. It's just we need to figure out a way to marry the knowledge of these two groups in a more effective way.
The contrast between the stuff those kids just presented and the delusional stuff we heard this morning about Bitcoin's going to replace gold or whatever they were talking about, it's very marked. So I just want to make a point about the technology heritage. The stuff that you saw this afternoon, this is the real stuff. The stuff this morning was whatever. The technology has actually got a heritage. It's got roots.
This wasn't invented yesterday.
It's strong. Yes, I wanted to convey that point to the bank people present.
I think that's a great point.
That not only is the stuff this afternoon the real stuff, but actually it's not just dropped out of the sky, come from another planet. It's got a heritage, and that's why to people like me, it's so important. It's got roots. It's real.
Many banks talk about the change the bank and the run the bank, and we all know the change the bank cost is about 15%, and 85% of bank expense is on the run the bank side, carrying the legacy and lugging it around as a giant anchor. I think that the blockchain ledger has an opportunity to massively simplify and decrease cost. But someone made the point that this is about network, and that's true. Implicit in the blockchain is effectively a marketplace concept. You need to have participants in the marketplace, whether they're buyers or sellers or traders, they're participants. And so, banks need to move.
The contrast between the plenary and here couldn't be bigger. And it's probably a different profile of people. It's also a different atmosphere. But the people who go to Innotribe are a little bit different. Actually, I got into the fight at the plenary with the woman who actually assigned me a seat. And she said, "We have to follow a system, sir." And I thought there couldn't be a more beautiful metaphor for the fact that the people in the plenary actually like to follow a system. And what we try to do here at Innotribe is get a little bit outside of that. But if you look at it, I think we're just at the beginning. The VC industry, Silicon Valley is being changed overnight. Silicon Valley used to be about building new tech companies. It's not about that anymore. They are funding companies that disrupt entire markets. Do you know how much venture capital Google got? $45 million. Last century, we talked about the VC industry investing millions. All of a sudden, we now see that Silicon Valley VCs are investing billions. And I can tell you, you don't have to be worried, but you should be. The next competitor could be a 27-year-old kid with a hoodie. So my suggestion for tomorrow, if we come back here, ditch the suit, wear a hoodie tomorrow, and enjoy Innotribe for day 2. Thank you.